We have on the line right now the Republican nominee for Congress in Illinois. I believe it's the sixth district. Yeah, it's the sixth district in Illinois. The one and only Keith Peacock. He is the mayor of Orland Park, Illinois. So, Keith, thanks for joining us here on Breitbart News Saturday.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, so there's lots to talk about here. I want to start with crime because I think this is a major issue, and I think the contrast between Orland Park and Chicago couldn't be any more serious, right? Like, it couldn't be any more real. You, as the mayor of Orland Park in Illinois, have gotten crime down significantly. You've made it the safest city in Illinois. So talk to us about that. How do you do that? And what are they doing wrong? What are the Democrat policies that they're doing wrong in like a Chicago or other cities around Illinois?
Well, so the Democratic policies that are wrong is the Kim Foxx policies, clearly, of catch and release, and we have to deal with that too. And so I became mayor 5 months after she took office, and we saw that time was increasing, and so we realized we had to have a different approach, and so we became much more proactive, using technology to identify, license plates that don't match their cars, license plates for stolen cars, those types of things, and also, for every traffic violation. It's amazing how many people carry drugs laying in their car, right? And then when that happens, we can search the car. So we've been much more proactive about getting people off the street, and one of the key things that we do is we process all of our evidence in-house, or we use a private lab, so we get it back in 24 hours as opposed to the state, which is 6 months or a year. Well, if you think about that, we have these people in custody, and we get charges even with Kim Foxx's office because we have so much evidence, and we still have them in custody. If you wait 6 months or a year, you have to release them, and now you have to put your office at risk to go find them, and it takes a lot of resources to go find these people. So that's one thing that we do that is very, very critical, and we just take a no-tolerance approach on everything, including our businesses. If they won't sign a complaint, we fine them, because if you call the police out, we expect you to cooperate with them, and that's part of their business licensing is they need to cooperate with police.
Right, and so again, we are seeing record high levels of crime in other cities in Illinois, but not in Orland Park. I mean, Orland Park is safe, right? Like, and that's really incredible. I think the contrast here, because if you look at the crime that you see in Chicago, you look at the crime you see elsewhere, it really shocking here. And if you want to know why this is happening, it's because Democrats are in control, right? Like, it's Democrats' policies, etc. And I've got your opponent's website up here. I mean, I'm looking at his website right now. I do my research before these interviews, and frankly, I'm looking at Sean Casten. He's the Democrat congressman who you're running against. He doesn't have anything talking about crime. All he's got is that he has a section on his website called Racial Justice, and in it he talks about co-sponsoring the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which goes after the police, and and so on and so forth. And then in it he talks about having co-sponsored H.R. 1, which is the Democrats' election takeover bill. And then it also says that he believes in BLM, right? That in BLM, Black Lives Matter. I mean, what? Like, I mean, since when is that any of that stuff serious in terms of actually making safe communities and standing up against the criminal element out there?
Well, so, yes, as you pointed out with Sean Casten, so he voted against extending the ban on fentanyl federally. He voted against extending the Violence Against Women Act. And as you pointed out, the George Floyd Act, voted for taking away qualified immunity from police officers. He's gone after police officers. He supports criminals, not the average citizen. And here in Orland Park, I mean, let's face it, we're not 90% Republican. We're probably 55% Republican here, and we have 90% support for our police officers and for the actions that we take. Because you know what? Democratic citizens, not Democratic elected officials, but Democrat citizens, they support the police. And that's probably the most important thing we do in Orland Park is we support our police. We hire good officers. We train those officers. And when we get complaints, we follow up on them to make them better. And we have the best police department in the state. And it's reflected in, keeping our citizens safe.
Right. Okay. So now another thing that your opponent, Sean Casten, did very recently is he voted for the Orwellian named, and we say it's the Orwellian named Inflation Reduction Act because it doesn't actually reduce inflation. It actually, at the very best for them, is inflation neutral, but it probably adds to inflation if you actually follow the policies laid that are carried out in it to the logical conclusion. This is the big environmental package that they just passed out of Congress. Now, he's voted for every single one of the major Democrat agenda items over the course of the last 2 years, from their so-called Rescue Act, again Orwellian named, to their Orwellian named infrastructure plan, which doesn't actually do infrastructure, but so on and all of these different bills that they've passed, these Biden agenda bills that have led to inflation, that have led to record high gas prices, that have led to the economic woes that we're seeing across America right now. This guy voted for all of it. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so Sean Casten is further left than AOC and the squad because he votes for all of those things you just said, and then everything that comes across for veterans, he votes against. And I'm talking about bills that are passed 420 to 5. He's one of the 5. Even the squad votes for those for most of those bills. So he is extremely far left. In the Inflation Reduction Act, as you talked about, which we call the Don't Say Inflation Act, he actually tweeted that inflation is zero. That's why I voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. Well, if it's zero, why did you vote for it? And secondly, if you think that inflation is zero, and as he tweeted before, we're not in a recession. If you think we're not in a recession and inflation is zero, if you cannot acknowledge that a problem exists, how can you possibly solve the problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely unbelievable here. So now the other big thing is this week he's been supportive of President Biden's decision to engage through executive action, not through Congress, which even Pelosi previously said that you have to go through Congress, but they're all falling in line behind their president, to engage in this mass transference of student loan debt. Now, I don't call it debt cancellation or forgiveness because it isn't debt cancellation or forgiveness, because guess what? The colleges and universities with their corrupt systems are still getting paid off. The government is still getting their money at the end of the day through the American taxpayers. Again, what they did here is they shifted the burden of debt from some people to other people. And other people are going to pick up the tab for the people who still have the debt. Now, I'm of the mindset that that we should be doing something about this student loan issue. It is a problem. Don't get me wrong. But however, the way that they're approaching this is extremely unfair to people who actually did pay their student loan debts and have made significant payments on them, or paid them off entirely already. It's also unfair to people who are very successful when they leave college. People that make more than $125,000 a year are not going to get the benefit here, and that's not fair to those people. That discourages success. And then thirdly, again, the people who are actually going to pick up the bill for this, rather than the colleges and universities out of their endowments. Frankly, I think what they should do is they should take the money out of the colleges and universities endowments. But again, the point is that here's a guy who has been extremely supportive of this unfair and possibly even illegal, I don't know how this will play out in litigation, proposal from the president.
For sure. This is appalling. As someone, and I'll just speak personally, as someone who was the first in my family to graduate from college, that worked full time and then paid my student loans, and then after I was married, paid for my student loans for my master's degree, paid for my wife's student loans for her undergrad, and she's the first one to graduate from high school in her family, and then we paid for her student loans for her master's program. Then we took out parent loans for our children. But the other thing we did is we made our children take out the max of their student loans so that they had skin in the game, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're trying to teach them the value of the education. And now the government's going to come in and say, oh, don't bother paying that back. When they took out that debt, they knew what they were doing. And all of the people that took this debt out, they're adults, and they made those decisions, and you're asking other people to pay for the decisions that they've made. It's unfair to folks like us. It's unfair to union workers and people who put themselves through trade schools or for an automotive tech school, and they're having to pay for it, or for people who, are like my parents and didn't go to college but worked really hard so that their kids, not so they could pay for their kids' college, but so their kids had the values to go to college and use their intelligence because it was something that was God-given to them that they really had a skill for, and use that, and they taught them to do that, and they went out and did that, or they saved up the money to help those kids. Why should they have to pay for other children to go to college? Why should people who are retired have to pay for other children besides their own? If they want to pay for their grandchildren, that's great, but they shouldn't be required to pay for something else. And it's $2,000 per taxpayer. It's just fundamentally unfair, and it's clearly unconstitutional. The president does not have the power. I don't see anywhere in the Constitution where it gives the president the power to spend money on college or university debt. And additionally, when they tried to pass this at the Democratic level, they couldn't get the votes. They didn't have the votes with a Democratic Congress to pass this. So they decided to go another route and the president just do it. Well, we are not a fiefdom. And if they want to pass this, pass it by law.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. So now, this is, I think, a symptom of, and you talk about the trade workers out there who are getting screwed as a result of this. I mean, what about the people who went on to become carpenters or plumbers or iron fitters, or, people that didn't go to a college and they went into a trade, and that takes a lot of work, by the way, to get through the certifications, et cetera. But a lot of those people are not taking out these giant student loans that somebody going and getting a gender studies degree, for instance, is taking out. Of the tens of thousands and perhaps even hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans that some folks out there are doing. I think that we were just talking to J.D. Vance about this, is that the bigger, broader theme of the last 20 years or more in American politics has been this elite mistreatment of working class people that has forgotten about regular folks around the trade workers, the union workers, etc. Those folks that you're talking about there that have been totally ripped off by this globalization and all these factories leaving and all this kind of stuff. Again, you see it again in this instance. I think that we've seen it in the recent elections. In 2016, we saw it with President Trump winning a whole bunch of working class folks in the Rust Belt, and then we saw it again in 2018. We've seen it again in 2020. It's a trend that seems to be continuing. Do you think that trend continues here going into the 2022 election, and that as working class people, those folks that you're talking about, by the way, many of those union workers that you're talking about there, those carpenters, plumbers, pipe fitters, iron workers, etc., they're oftentimes traditional Democrat voters, maybe they say, you know what, enough of these people. I'm not voting for them anymore. I'm going to vote for somebody who's actually going to go stick up for me in Congress and stick up for someone, vote for some Republicans out there. Do you think that continues? Do you think that trend helps you in your race?
So I do think it helps me. I think that, half of my district is in the southwest portion of Cook County, and there's a lot of trade workers, a lot of union workers that have been traditionally Democrat. But I can tell you that if I sit down with any of them, they agree with me on almost every issue and don't agree with Sean Casten on anything. And it's a function the Republican Party needs to get in front of these people and explain to them and get them to start voting on the issues and not just looking at someone who's Republican and say, oh, we can't vote for them because we voted Democrat our whole life. We have to start looking at the issues. And I think that's happening more and more and more. And I think that's critical because these policies do not help the working class. They screw the working class, as you said. They take money that they're working hard for and they're paying off their student loans. They're giving people making, $50,000-$60,000 a year to working, a working couple each making $50,000 a year, struggling to save for their kids' college. They're paying for someone else's college. But not only that, they're paying for rich people to buy electric Mercedes and electric Teslas. Why? Why should they be funding their toys? Why should they be funding their college education? Why should someone a medieval Latin degree from Harvard? Okay, does anybody think that person is marketable for a job? No one thinks that. Why should they have to pay for someone's stupid decision to do that? And frankly, even people who, my wife's a teacher. If you're going to Harvard to teach second grade, you're probably not going to get a return on your investment. It's probably not a good decision, right? So people need to make better decisions. And I don't care if you're 18 years old and you're young, you still need to make better decisions, and you need to honor your debt. No one's saying that you shouldn't pay your mortgage. No one's saying that you shouldn't pay your auto loans. I'm sure that the Democrats will start saying that too. But I think you take out the debt. You've made the decision. You need to pay it back.
I couldn't agree more. Keith Peacock, where can people go to learn more about you and get involved in the campaign if they so choose?
So they can learn more about me at www.keithpecaw.com. So that's KeithPeekau.com, and all the information about me and how you can volunteer and how you can help and how you can donate, anything that you can do to help. We need all the help we can get because we need to flip the House and we need to take Sean Casten out of the seat. He does not represent our district well. He does not represent, I don't believe, the average American either.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and this is one of those key battleground districts out there across the country. If Keith wins this race, I'll tell you this, Nancy Pelosi is not going to be the Speaker of the House anymore. So this is an extremely important congressional race. So I really want to thank you for joining us. We'll look forward to having you back. We'll